Sat Sri Akal, Jai Jinendra, Namaste, Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, blessings. It is a great privilege and honor to be with you all today. And I would like to be able to not only address the subject that I've been asked, but also to be able to share with you why I think this gathering and your coming together is so particularly important. I note that this is your 29th breakfast. You know there's a game, it's a particularly rabbinic game, or a game of Jewish tradition that is called Gematria, because every letter in Hebrew has a numeric value. And 28 in numeric terms is koach, which means strength. And you are now one beyond strength, so you are of a superhuman strength. I actually also noted that, in fact, 29 is ka'ach, like a brother, or like a brother and a sister, and therefore especially appropriate for brotherhood and sisterhood. But you also may be familiar, I'm sure most of you are familiar, with a phrase in Psalm 133. Behold how good and how pleasant it is when brothers dwell together. That's the, if you like, the biblical quote of brotherhood or sisterhood. But in fact, the Hebrew word doesn't exactly say what I've just translated. It says, Hinei matov u'manaim, shevet achim, how beautiful, pleasant, how good and pleasant it is when brothers sit, gam yachad, also together. And that's very significant because it's not such a big deal to get brothers to sit, but when you can get brothers to sit with a sense of a oneness, that they are actually together, also together, that's a great achievement. And therefore coming together in all this diversity because we recognize that there are things that unite us beyond that particularity, the higher goals that we share for our humanity at large, that is the strength and the importance of your brotherhood and sisterhood interfaith cooperation. May it continue to go from strength to strength. So I've been asked to address Thank you. And actually after that rather lengthy but very generous introduction, I probably can sit down now. But nevertheless, I have been asked to address this title of Building Bridges and Breaking Down Walls. And it's a very beautiful title. And I think the two do perforce come together, because there are building bridges, which is the nature of my work, where one is perforce breaking down walls of suspicion, of hostility, of prejudice, of misunderstanding. But even in the new horizons of interfaith relations, especially to religions of the East, where perhaps Western religions did not have much real engagement and vice versa in the past, it is still breaking down walls, not so much of hostility, but of ignorance and of complete misunderstanding or substantial unawareness of the world and inner commitments of the other. My own personal journey in interfaith relations began when I was a very young rabbi in a very, very large Orthodox Jewish congregation, probably the largest in the world at the time in Cape Town, South Africa. And I came to interfaith relations out of a commitment to social justice, because I knew that my religion taught that it's wrong to discriminate against people based on any physical characteristic or ethnic or racial dimension. And I wanted my congregation, my community, to be seen to be engaged in a struggle against an iniquitous apartheid system. But one of the few ways you could do it without immediately running foul of the authorities and being thrown into jail was through religion. And therefore I came to religion out of a commitment to social justice. And I managed to establish, together with the heads of the different religious communities in South Africa at the time, the first ever interfaith framework that we called the Interfaith IFF, the Interfaith Foundation. And it was a big if only. But as I came to these particular meetings, and I have a lot of stories that I could tell you about the processes that led up to it, as I came to these meetings and I met very impressive leaders of the different faith communities, I was amazed to see how ignorant they were of me. And even I could understand somebody that maybe comes from a religion far away, but I was amazed that even the Christian clergy locally had incredibly distorted understandings about Jews and Judaism and amazing areas of ignorance. But I also discovered at that moment that the truth was that I was pretty ignorant about them too. And I had all kinds of misconceptions or simplistic categories or interpretations, which as I started engaging them, I realized were actually not right. And there was not only a question of justice for me to be able to understand them and represent them as they really were, but it was my enlightened self-interest that if I wanted to be represented the way I wanted to be understood, it was necessary for me to understand them the way they wanted to be understood. That therefore was very basic. There was also a little bit of an epiphany for me. I'm not sure if you will all share it, but for me, I realized, and I was already, as I say, a rabbi of an established congregation, that my tradition preaches the idea of a universal, omnipotent, omnipresent deity, but that in some ways we have tried almost to encapsulate that deity of the cosmos within one's own particular tradition and heritage. And obviously, if God relates to us in all our diversities, there must be diverse ways of relating to the divine. In fact, to suggest that the divine can be encapsulated in any one exclusive tradition is to limit the nature of the divine itself. And that should be patently contradictory, if not ridiculous. So I realized, in fact, that engaging people from other traditions that were not from mine, I was getting glimpses of the divine presence in the world beyond my own particular tradition, and that it was an enormously enriching experience in and of itself. I also discovered that I had to deepen my own understanding of my tradition even more than I had in order to articulate it effectively to those with whom I was engaging. So it became a very, very enriching area of activity for me, aside from the very significant practical benefits and consequences. And I've been asked to share some of the areas in this regard in which I'm involved in with you. As you've heard, I am employed by AJC to, in effect, be its ambassador for Judaism to the religions of the world. This is a wonderful job. I have two little things to say about that. One is that it's a job for more than one lifetime, so I've got job security for life. And the other is that I hope I'm making a better world with all my traveling around the world and all the things I do, but even if I'm kidding myself, I'm having a hell of a lot of fun. But there are some very, very significant developments in recent times, and I'll just allude to a few of them, so as not to keep you here all morning. If we talk, and I've therefore mentioned three categories essentially in this story. Let me now just identify them more clearly. One is fighting bigotry and prejudice and misunderstanding in order to be able to combat misrepresentation and bigotry, and therefore that's the enlightened self-interest for all of us. The second is to advance shared values. Shared values also means to work together for peace and justice in our world. And in all these areas, there are today more interfaith organizations and activities than ever before in human history. Interfaith relations is a growingly exponential industry. We do not have, certainly within the Jewish community, adequate resources to be able to respond to the demand. The demand in interfaith relations is far greater than the demand in terms of, if you like, defense activities to protect the Jewish community. But because the defense in areas and matters that concern challenge and hatred and fighting hatred and bigotry in terms of the immediate need get much greater attention, so much greater resources are devoted to this. But it may be compared to the enormous challenge that we face in our world today. Today we seem to be in a world that's never been more dangerous. Certainly we know about terrible things going in our world more than ever before. We know about terrible things that are being done in the name of religion, whether it's in Iraq or in Syria or in Nigeria or even parts in our own particular neighborhoods. And these cause us enormous distress, as they should, because we all know, to the degree that we know our different communities, that these do not reflect the true, noble, exalted ideas of the respective religious traditions. The problem today is not that these things didn't exist before, but that modern technology makes them knowable today in a way they weren't before. And it all comes into our living room, and it's all publicized because that which is negative and sensationalist is that which sells newspapers and builds up TV rating. That's not the fault of the media. It's something in the human spirit that prefers the blood and guts and a negative sensationalist to the good news. The reality is the good news is far, far greater than the bad one. As I say, there's never been so much interfaith cooperation and work together in so many different areas, and some I will enumerate in a moment. But that's not what sells the newspapers and what gets the TV rating. And then there is a reality today that the technology not only enables us to know all the bad things, but it enables a few nutcases to be able to do terrible things that only complete armies were able to do once upon a time. So there are the dangers of modern technology that very often make us feel that we're on the defensive, or place us on the defensive, when in truth there has never been as much cooperation, as much understanding above the different barriers and boundaries that define the different religious communities of the world. Perhaps the most dramatic of these transformations is one that today is almost taken for granted, even by those who are part of it, namely the transformation in Catholic-Jewish relations. Because there probably was never in history a community that was defined as rejected, cursed by God, even in league with the devil, responsible for all the terrible things that happen in the world, condemned to have to be cursed and to wander forever into the end of time because it didn't accept the Christian dispensation. That was the way Jews were viewed. And today the Jewish community is viewed by the Catholic Church, in the words of its popes, as the dearly beloved elder brother of the church of the original covenant, never broken, never to be broken. I mean, that's a mind-boggling transformation. There's probably nothing like it in the human history. And if such a toxic, neuralgic relationship can go to such one of genuine brotherhood and sisterhood today, there is no relationship that is beyond transformation, no matter how vitiated, poisoned it may be by political realities. And we have to do all we can to be able to advance that. One of those, which was referred to in the kind of introduction, is of particular significance because it is not coming from where you expect interfaith initiatives to come from, not from the most enlightened modern segments of modern society, but from the very traditional heartland of the Muslim world, from Saudi Arabia. That's the initiative of King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, who just passed away. It has now been reaffirmed by his successor, King Salman, as a commitment of Saudi Arabia to promoting interfaith dialogue. There's something that sounds to some a little bit contradictory in this, because in Saudi Arabia, other religions are not able to openly be practiced, and certainly not able to build their particular institutions. But when King Abdullah met Pope Benedict XVI, he said to him and asked for his support, and this is officially supported by the Vatican, this initiative. He said, if we are seen to work together, then attitudes will be able to change in my country, and we will be able to allow the reality in our society to undergo a transformation. This is a very important tactical point. Sometimes there are those with whom there is an opportunity that may not represent all the values and the social mores that you particularly want to uphold. But you know the famous adage, you can either curse the darkness or you can light a candle. And if you seek to maintain your own personal purity in order to allow the darkness to be able to prevail, you have done nothing for yourself and nothing to help clear the darkness. The importance of taking the opportunity to light a candle, even when it's coming from a quarter which may not yet be enlightened in the way you want, is of enormous significance and ultimately to be of great blessing. And last November, I participated in a conference organized by this organization, KAICI, the King Abdullah International Center of Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, that was established by the kingdom, by the governments of Austria, Spain, together with Saudi Arabia, and together with the Holy See. And this conference brought together the religious leadership from Sunni and Shia communities, very high-level leadership from Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, other parts of the Middle East, and from all the different Christian denominations, and from the Yazidis and from the Kurds, with a very important declaration, which you can see on its website, KAICID, actually just K-A-I-C-I-I-D, just go on to Google it, you'll be able to see the different statements and declarations, condemning ISIS, the activities of Al-Qaeda, as totally in conflict with the noble teachings of Islam. A very important statement, but what was much more important than the statement in itself was the fact that for those Christian communities and those Yazidi and Kurdish communities, they were there together with the dominant Shia and Sunni leadership that were giving them the support for the legitimacy and for the flourishing of their future, of their communities and their future within those particular lands. Such organizations that can facilitate that kind of interaction provide an enormous service. In the end, what is that service? It's the service that you are providing. The service that you are providing, that when you bring together consciously or otherwise, is the fundamental doctrine of all our religious traditions of hospitality. Hospitality doesn't just mean giving somebody some food. Hospitality means giving someone a sense that they are valued. You receive them as an honored person amongst you, of one whose integrity is respected by you. That value of hospitality is critical in combating alienation and humiliation that very often are those factors that nurture insularity, isolationism, hostility, and even violence. And therefore, you serve as a model in this regard. And other interfaith initiatives around the world build up that sense of esteem in every particular community that is welcomed and recognized by the other. There are, of course, many other challenges within humanity today, and I'm involved in many of those in terms of the interfaith organizations. Environmental responsibility, dealing with the challenges of climate change, our responsibilities towards our creation. If we believe that this cosmos is the work of a higher truth and reality, we have a responsibility to it, as well as, of course, to the summit that is the human person within it. And therefore, we have to advance human dignity. We have to be able to advance the well-being of our environment. There are a number of interesting initiatives from the East that have come recently. There is an initiative for environmental responsibility that comes from Swami Chidanand Saraswati from Rishikesh. It's called WASH, which is essentially the purification of water and sanitation and health. They had also a big global conference on this. Religions for Peace, of which I'm one of its international president, one of the largest interfaith organizations in the world, had a big summit on the question of environment and sustainable ecology in September, together with the Earth Institute. All these areas are areas in which the local needs to be able to serve the global as well as vice versa. And so many areas where you can, of course, draw inspiration from that which is being done on an international level. But in the end, the international has to be able to know that there are those on the ground in different locations around the world who are doing that work that can be genuinely represented. That especially goes for my work. I'm able to do what I do because I know that AJC has 30 offices across the United States and offices in other parts of the world that represent a genuine, deep commitment of the Jewish community to making this world a better place. So whatever we can do that connects the local to the global empowers both at the same time. I might also mention another area, perhaps to conclude these examples, just few examples from my work, as I know you also have an interest in it, and that is the work to combat trafficking. There is modern human slavery. Above all, the exploitation of women and children, a terrible stain and blot on our humanity, and there are things we can do about it. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had the honor of being invited by Pope Francis, actually I think my 10th meeting since he became Pope, and I was one of a group of maybe we were perhaps 15 representatives of the religions of the world, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Ecumenical Patriarch, the head of the Orthodox Church. There was Amma, the famous hugging Hindu leader, and there was Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist leader, and from the Muslim world there was both the head of Al-Azhar, Sheikh Tayyib, and the Ayatollah Muhammad Madarisi of the Shia leadership, and Pope Francis's friends, Dr. Abud and Rabbi Skorka from Argentina, and yours truly, to be able to sign a joint declaration condemning trafficking as absolutely in fundamental conflict of our religious teaching and something that has to be uprooted and that all religious communities have to strive their best to support in order to be able to affirm human dignity. Where I live in Jerusalem, we face very many challenges. I'm not sure that religious initiatives in themselves are going to be able to transform those political realities, but we have some 200 organizations working in Jewish-Arab relations, social, philanthropic, advocacy area. We have created a Council of Religious Institutions of the Holy Land that bring together Palestinian religious leadership, the head of the Sharia courts of the Palestinian Authority, the Minister of Awqaf of the Palestinian Authority, together with the heads of Christian communities and of the Chief Rabbinate of Israel. We've still got to get the Chief Rabbinate of Israel to come together with non-Orthodox rabbis, but if we can do the others, then maybe we can get there too. But we are able to achieve certain things where there is a will, because there is a genuine motivation on the part of religious leadership to be seen to be part of the solution and not to be seen as part of the problem. We have not yet been able to convince the secular political world that this is the case. And this, I think, is an enormous challenge before us. I can understand why secular politicians think that because religion is abused, they therefore don't want to have anything to do with it. But that's a fallacy. Because religion is often part of the problem because it's used by people and abused by people in certain ways, the solution is not to avoid it in the course of peace. On the contrary, if you don't want religion to be part of the problem, you have to make it part of the solution. And we try to do that both in terms of those of us working locally in the Holy Land, but also through organizations like Religions for Peace, which embraces, I think, 70 countries and 15 different religions around the world, and building interreligious councils, both in places where there are conflict, but especially in places after conflict, to be able to build up greater understanding and cooperation between them. So in conclusion, let me say that it is very important for me to have had this opportunity to be with you this morning, and I thank the organizing committee and especially Gail Binderglas for bringing me all the way from Jerusalem, from very nice weather, to be able to bring you at least a little sunshine, and to be with you here today, to thank you for what you do. But just coming together is of enormous importance and should not be dismissed as just trivial talk, or as a late colleague of mine, Rabbi Leon Klinicki, used to say, tea and sympathy. Tea and sympathy is not something to sneeze at. In this world, we need as much solidarity with one another as possible. The divides today are less between the religions and more within the religions, between those whose minds are insular and isolationist, nurtured by fear and insecurity, and those whose arms and hearts are expansive, embracing the other and understanding how much more we have to gain through such positive engagement. And we need to bring these positive hearts and minds in our communities together as often as possible, both for our own support, but above all as testimony to our neighborhood, to our states, to our countries, to the world, of what is possible, what we know is possible, of the way the world should be, to testify to a world in which the diversity of God's creation is a blessing, not a threat, a source of enormous richness, not something to be nervous about, something that we should all be able to celebrate and to be able to show is enormous dimensions of the divine gift to humanity at large. Thank you.
would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.